What's up, guys? No gym needed. We might have to do a chapter by chapter video series on this now. It's getting hardcore. So, we called it. It was a little different than the scenario I made. Well, I mean, it was a lot different than the scenario I made in the last video, but that was a cool fan fiction, so I'm glad I made it. But we knew that the dragon army was too small. We knew he had to use the other sovereign's armies. We called that from the second we saw the dragon army and what it consisted of and what its numbers were. We knew it. So now they're trampling down Canada. We called that too. We knew the dragons were going to come out of the Canada's gate. We didn't have the best evidence for that, but we knew it. We knew it. Of course, no giants came out of the China gate like we thought. But the plan of the sovereigns was genius. And what I like is that we could have predicted it. There was enough information for us to predict it. It wasn't a contradiction or anything like that. It was great, wonderful story progress. So anyways, Jin Woo has now come for the Kamish runestone. Yo, we speculated that would be a key for defeating the Lord of Destruction. This guy can even kill Jin Woo's shadow soldiers. That's how epic he is. Just mouth beam, straight up Nappa. It's too bad Adam White had to get killed with that dumb Canadian hunter, Jay Mills. We called it. We're like, that Canadian guy's about to get abyssed. He's about to get dismissed into the abyss, y'all. What else we got on here? I've definitely got some good predictions coming up in this video, so hang on a second. Oh yeah, and of course, if you've seen my other videos on YouTube, you know I don't hate Canada. I actually love Canada, so let's just get that out of the way. Canada's awesome. It's just the fictional character Jay Mills was a total jackass. Now that Jin Woo has the full powers of the Shadow Lord, can he extract Kamish's shadow? I think yes. Before his shadow extraction skill, that's kind of hard to say. Before his shadow extraction skill was only at level 2. Now he's beyond max, and his powers over death should be close to absolute. He also had one more attempt left before he gave up. At least he could have another good conversation with Kamish and ask if he knows any weaknesses of the Dragon Lord. That would be smart, right? Also, the Kamish runestone. I'm guessing it gives the user a specific advantage over any dragon below ancient grade. Like their breath attacks won't work on you or something. But that wouldn't help even the playing field for Jin Woo versus the sovereign of berserk dragons. So maybe it does something like weakens all dragons you face by 30%. Which could level the playing field a little bit between Jin Woo and the Lord of Destruction. Of course, he qualifies as a dragon. I think the Lord of Destruction will try and do a talk no jutsu to Jin Woo. Just kind of like how the Beast guy did. The Beast guy pretended like he was going to make peace with Jin Woo, but really, it was something different. It was a different story in the Beast Sovereign's head. So I think the Lord of Destruction is going to try to give a new narrative that Jin Woo's never thought of and try to get his sympathy for the cause. But Jin Woo, as we know, he sees things and then he sees through things, and that's one of the reasons why the Shadow Sovereign picked him, and something the wizard thought was cool in the very beginning when he went into the dual dungeon. So Jin Woo is going to see through him and realize he's way too dangerous to leave alive. And there's just no way Jin Woo's soldiers can beat the Sovereign of Berserk Dragons. Jin Woo has to fight him himself, and he needs something to even the playing field. The Kamish runestone will help, but he'll still be powerful. Then something will happen, and he'll get his full power back. Maybe the runestone may break or something. Then Jin Woo will get his final power-up. The story's not going to end until we know. It better not end, I should say, until we know on what conditions the Absolute Being died, and where the Sovereigns came from, or come from, and Yeah, we know they come from the darkness, but how exactly, we don't know. I've speculated on that in a previous video though, and I'm gonna get really deep on that in a second. I think I got the best theory that I can possibly make. I'm gonna say this theory, and I'm not gonna have any regrets if it's wrong. So hang on a second. Yeah, we also need answers on the rulers in the world tree. The details of that are still being hidden from us. Basically, here's my theory. You have light and dark, and they're even in all balances and respects. By making beings out of light, there must be their equivalents created in darkness. So you use light to make beings with X amount of mana. Well, by consequence, beings of darkness with an equal amount of mana had to be made. One cannot exist without the other, and that's why they would be fighting forever with each other, because they were equal forces. The absolute being existed, and his existence meant he could also see an abyss of eternal darkness. It was the shadow that he himself was casting in this world where everything must be balanced. But as long as the absolute being remained alone, the abyss would always remain empty. But he created beings of light by means of the world tree. But in turn, the sovereigns also came into existence. Maybe the absolute being made the universe first out of a perfect balance of light and dark, then took a planet with light, life energy, and planted the world tree, hoping there would be no need for an equivalent exchange if he did it this way. But there was, and the absolute being had no words to say. It loved its creations, but couldn't bring itself to tell them the truth. So it gave its own life to show its love for its creation. But once again, the need for balance created an absolute being of darkness. Like when the sun that dominates the daylight in the sky sets, the moon comes out to rule the night. I've already said how the Shadow Sovereign proves the absolute being heard the screams of its loyal ones dying. And the Shadow Sovereign is emotionally connected to all his soldiers. And I predict the absolute being was emotionally connected to all living things, especially those grown on the world tree. So, by the absolute being alive, it could always see this eternal darkness that it was creating, an abyss. And that's why I didn't want to create any other living thing, because by consequence, a living thing of darkness would have to be made. And then, when it did do that, when it was tired of being lonely and it created, it had a conundrum. It kept seeing its loyal ones die and it couldn't tell them the truth. So it gave its life to them. That was the only way it could show them. It really sympathized with them. But then, by the absolute being, the most brilliant light, by the light itself never faded out. They were still able to make tools out of this thing's existing light, but its life, its consciousness, I guess, went away. And in turn, a consciousness woke up within the abyss, that is Osborne, and kept this balance of light and dark. And so, that's where I think it's going with this. Even if there wasn't 8 different general rulers of the most brilliant fragments, and there was 8 sovereigns, the power scale was still equal, because they would constantly fight without any decisive victor, forever and ever. Therefore, it shows me the magic energy is the same. The balance is kept, even if there wasn't 8 rulers, which there might actually be 8 ruler generals. So this is about as far as I can speculate now. What more can we say? We're gonna have to read the next chapter, but I hope some of these predictions are right. At the very least, I got no regrets. I'm using all the information we're given to try to make predictions. Let me give it one more thought and see if I can come up with one more idea here, or something that can incorporate everything we know. What if at one point the absolute being was given life by something else? You know, maybe it's a continuous process, just like the sun rising and setting and the moon rising and setting. What if the absolute being knew it had to die eventually, so that a shadow sovereign could be made, and then eventually the shadow sovereign has to die so that a new absolute being can be made? Would that kind of make sense, right? And then all these other things are just happening in between. I don't think it's a coincidence that Osborne became the shadow sovereign right after the absolute being died. I feel like that might have been a natural process, and the absolute being, the only thing it had power over was to choose who it wanted to make into the shadow sovereign. And if that theory is correct, Jin Woo might have to give his life for the absolute being to come back. But what about the tools of the absolute being? Its light still exists. I want to see Jin Woo wield every single tool of the absolute being. I want to see him go right in front of the world tree with full shadow armor, just fully decked out with all the tools of the absolute being, and then see what happens. What happens if you combined all the tools? You like remold them or something. I think we're gonna see something like that happen. Alright guys, see you next time. Later.